Night-SMTN.
How is it going? And welcome to PersonaCon 2020. I don't know if we're yearing these. I don't know if that's like bad luck. I'm your host of this panel, Spencer Presley. Unfortunately, I have some bad news. This panel is not about Torchwood 4 PS's personal history of Persona 4 Dancing All Night, but this is about Persona 4 Dancing All Night, the history of the game, the legacy that it still has 5 years after its release, and all of that fun jazz. I don't know if I already said this. My brain is going a million miles an hour. My name is Spencer Presley. I am the host. I am the host of Shin Megami Tensei Network, a weekly SMTN Persona podcast. God, you guys are just booping and bopping. It's very fun and definitely not distracting. But yeah, so I am the host of SMTN. It's a podcast / community. But yeah, we're here to talk about. No, I can't get rid of the boops. Otherwise, it's not like a real. Convention. It's you guys are like the rustling of the chairs. But yeah, guys. So we are here to half joke around, half ignore Dad, and mostly talk about Persona 4 Dancing All Night. So as I mentioned, Persona 5 Dancing All Night has turned 5+ years old as of 2020. And it's really crazy to kind of think about how different the world is, at least in terms of Atlus as a developer and a publisher, as well as the fandom in terms of what people think of Dan or what people even thought of it back then. Persona 5 Dancing All Night. But, oh my gosh. Chat, you are having too much fun for me. Either way, Persona 5 Dancing... Jesus, I did it again. This is we're having a trip. I don't know what it is about Persona 5 that did that for me. Here we go. So, yes, as I'm going to stop looking at the chat and actually be a little bit more informative. If you guys did not know, Persona 4 Dancing All Night was first announced all the way back in fall, I think November specifically, of 2013. This was right after the buyout of Sega and Atlus. So basically, if you guys weren't aware of at the time, in 2013, the Index Group, which is basically like the big parent company before Sega, who owned all of Atlus, were bankrupt, and Sega basically bought them all out and absorbed them into their company. As a part of this merger, one of the big sort of first steps they wanted to do was that series of announcements where they had 4 Persona games get announced. There was obviously Persona 5, Persona Q, Persona 4 Ultimax, and finally Persona 4 Dancing All Night. This was a crazy big event where as someone who was following it, because SMTN was around at the time, like, following that announcement in 2013 was just so insane, because you've even probably still to this day never seen Atlus do anything like that in terms of the scale, the number of announcements, how basically much they were just shooting their shot of just like, hey, just because we're bought by Sega doesn't mean anything is going to change. Spoilers, it did. But all of these games got announced, and I think what was so funny is that of all of them, obviously the PlayStation Vita exclusive Rhythm game stood out kind of as the dark horse of the announcements as, okay, why? Is there a reason for this? Like, what's the big deal? And a lot of people were kind of iffy about it. So if you go and look at that first announcement trailer, one of the interesting things about it is the fact that it was heavily marketed on the fact of this is a collaboration between Atlus and Dingo. If you aren't aware, Dingo is one of the early primary developers who worked on the Project Diva series. So these are the Hatsune Miku rhythm games that were on PSP, arcades, and yeah, at this point I think just the first Project Diva F on Vita would be out. Maybe PS3 as well, but Dingo had a very good reputation at the time for working on these rhythm games and making them very financially successful. And this was one of the big benefits that Atlus had because Dingo was a partner with Sega, and obviously now that they all were part of the same parent company, partnerships like this were a whole lot easier than, let's say, Atlus teaming up with Arc System Works for Ultimax. So, after that announcement trailer, you really didn't get a lot. The trailer showed off a little bit of gameplay. They had the models basically showing off dancing on a preset background for Konami, Rise, and Yu with their new dancing costumes. And I would say the reception outside of fans who were already sort of thinking the series was getting milked at the time was pretty good. But one of the oddities with it was the silence that followed afterwards. Over the course of the next year, Persona 4 Dancing heard absolutely nothing, I think, for about 10 months. After 2013 showed the announcement of Dancing All Night, one of the sort of weird things about the silence was what's kind of going on. There wasn't updates in the Persona Stalker Club, there weren't any updates in the magazines. Like, honestly, we were getting more information about things like Persona 5, Ultimax, and especially Q, because Q released a year later in 2014. Along with Ultimax. So, 1 year later, in September of 2014, Atlus basically re-revealed the game without anybody knowing it. So, they had a new trailer showing off new dance models, and what's so odd about this is if you look at the marketing, there was never any official coming out and saying, hey, Dingo is off the project. But at the time, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes trouble in terms of what Dingo wanted to produce, in terms of they wanted a very much, here is Hatsune Miku's, here is a Project Diva Persona 4 game. But the team at P Studio was very, very, very adamant, especially the producer and director, Wada. He was very much so wanting a story. He wanted this to feel like a continuation of the story. And if you've played it, as we're going to get into it later, Persona 4 Dancing is basically the epilogue of Persona 4 Golden in a lot of different ways. But they had so much internal struggles in terms of getting what they wanted with the game. The game just sort of felt like you had slapped the Persona 4 label onto just a Project Diva mod and called it a day. And there's even some screenshots out there of what the story element used to look like. The story elements just used those 3D models. There was not a lot of original art, and there wasn't much story on the focus to begin with, outside of it primarily being about Rise, Yu, and Konami. Along with that trailer, Atlus had come out in interviews and basically said, we're no longer working with Dingo. The brunt of their work is still pretty much in the game in terms of the engine it's on, along with the fact that they're using those models, but those models were also primarily co-developed with P Studio, just because they have a very specific sort of visual style they want. So if you look at the credits, there's actually very little of Dingo's team members credited in there to begin with at all. But what's so odd is even after all these years, if you go and look up stuff for the development of Dancing All Night, Dingo continuously still gets mentioned, even though the final game basically had, if we're being maybe generous, 5% of their work really was into the final product. So, going on from 2014, the reveal trailer happened of showing off more models and basically announcing that the game was getting pushed into 2015. There was never a super hard set date outside of kind of late 2014, early 2015. And the whole team at P Studio just kind of quieted up and decided, okay, hey, we are going to hunker down, work on this game, and not show it off till it's basically done. And so this is what's kind of crazy about it, as the whole team didn't really do a lot outside of tiny updates, tiny little interviews. They were obviously putting out other games, so there wasn't as much focus like there is now. Like Scramble not being announced and stuff for the West, it's kind of weird. It's like, well, you're not really talking about Catherine, so that's not a reason why you're not talking about Scramble. Either way, going into 2015, what's so insane about this, especially if you watch this live, is that Atlus held this huge concert event for their Persona 5. Basically, it was a trailer release party disguised as one of their live concert tours. But what was so insane about it is that they live streamed 2 days worth of content, which actually me and a bunch of other friends all recorded ourselves doing live. And while we were watching 2 days of footage with just terrible countdowns, horrendously bad CG, um, bits and pieces of the Persona 3 movie. It almost felt like a punishment until the final little bit. And what's so insane is right before Persona 5 got officially revealed, they had hyped up that they were announcing a new project or a new song exclusively at this concert. And what happened is, out of nowhere, and remember, all we've seen at this point for Persona 4 Dancing was 2 trailers barely representing the full game, and we knew that this dancing game was coming out in 2015. So this is February of 2015, and they just drop Dance, which is the opening track of the song, and they do a live performance of it, sort of similar to how they later revealed Persona 3 and 5 Dancing. But what was so awesome about that is the reception to that was so insane. Everyone was like so excited, and the reception for Dance's reveal song was very, very, very well received, especially amongst me and my friends in the community. And what was so cool about that was not only were they announcing that the game was back in development, they immediately started putting out material, new trailers, and had a release date. They announced that, hey, the game is coming out June 25th, 2015, which was just a matter of months away. So at that point, a little over 4 months. And we later found out in the West that we were going to be getting it in North America in September and November for Europe. This was back when Atlus didn't put out their games in Europe, so there was still that kind of weird delay in terms of getting NIS to put stuff out. So the trailer drops, and they just do a swell of like all the right information. They're showing off the game, they're showing off the collector's edition, they're showing off the special branded system, which, by the way, if you have the Persona 4 Dancing All Night special edition for PlayStation Vita, it is such a gorgeous system. It comes with an exclusive theme, which even had an exclusive song that's not even in the game. Like, they put a lot of hard work and care into not only the system, the game, the presentation. Like, you could really tell that this wasn't just like, hey, we're doing a cash grab, like we're just kind of knocking this out. Like, the team really cared about Persona 4 Dancing All Night with its development and especially its release. And what was so crazy about that was going into the actual development timeline of this team. Basically, when they announced that game in February of 2015, the game was done. Their whole time was working on DLC from February all the way up until release, and you can tell that by the way that they announced DLC all the way up until the official release date with footage, screenshots, everything. And that's just very common for Atlus in terms of they like to basically announce a release date with the game being done, bug test the crap out of it until official release, and just knock all of DLC out in terms of development, even if it's a padded out release in terms of delivering on that DLC. So the months leading in from February to June with the Japanese marketing, at least, were very common for a lot of stuff you'd see with Atlus stuff now. Trailers showing off specific characters, specific songs, different marketing, things like that. We're not going to go over all of that just because there's no real point in me being like, here's the Naruto trailer. What did we think of the Naruto trailer? So what I do want to get into is what was so interesting about this in the sense of how this game, kind of going back to its development timeline, September of last year, that game was barely getting handed over from P Studio behind the scenes and done by February of the next year. So we have October, November, December, January, February, 5 months of active development that was publicly known. And behind the scenes, I've had members on the Japanese side of the team tell me that they were working on that in terms of choreography, modeling, getting the gameplay systems ready, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of testing for about 9 months altogether before the project was basically publicly known for the release date, which is really insane. I don't have a lot of other rhythm games or music games to kind of compare that to. I don't know if that's excessively short by other rhythm games, but by Atlus standards, that's very, very, very soon. And considering how genuinely well the game was received with rhythm game fans in particular, along with Atlus fans, is a really big testament, because there are very, very, very few bugs. The ones that are basically in there, you kind of have to already be like an uber nerd to kind of point out with. As a Vita exclusive, it stood out as like running exceptionally well. It ran at, I think it was 30 frames and about 540p, and especially on the, no matter if you were playing on OLED or LCD screen, just absolutely popped. The colors are great. it just kind of seemed like the right place, right time, and you can even tell about that because how well the game sold. Give me one second, because I'm about to basically keel over from rambling too much. So the sales of it with Persona 4 Dancing All Night, it had sold very, very well in its first week. It had actually sold excuse me, it had sold over 95,000 units in Japan for a Vita exclusive is exceptionally well. And the life-to-date sales right now, it's a little over 120K, combining Japanese and worldwide sales. One of the interesting facts about it, though, is that I guess before Scramble it was third place. So right now it is the fourth best-selling. It is the fourth best-selling spin-off title for all of the Persona games. But what's so crazy about that is you have to remember that for the numbers, none of this includes the PlayStation 4 port, which we're going to get into later. So this is on a system a lot of people count as not selling very well with the Vita, being right up there with stuff like Persona 4 Arena, Persona Q obviously had a much larger install base with the 3DS. So sales-wise, it did very, very well for them. And Atlas, I think, was even more surprised by that, coming off of the initial tepid response, the surprise reveal getting as well receptive. And I think a large part of this as well is people don't really know this in the West is the pre-order bonus for Persona 4 Dancing All Night was like perfect marketing genius. It was an exclusive trailer for Persona 5, which was scheduled to be coming out later that year / early next year, which was going to be September 2016. So this exclusive trailer was like the pre-order bonus as long as you got the physical copy. You came with this little red envelope. It's really, really cool. And just had this little exclusive trailer for it that had a little bit of old footage in there mixed in with new stuff, but in general was like, this is a great thing of like Persona 5 hype was already very, very high at the time, especially rolling off that concert. And this being like, hey guys, buy Dancing, even if you're not interested in terms of it being a Persona game or a rhythm game, this is going to be the only way you can get a shot of Persona 5. Kind of similar to, I guess, what's like the two most easy answers? It's like Crackdown having the Halo 3 beta access or Metal Gear Solid 2 demo being in Zone of the Enders. Okay, so Persona 4 Dancing is out on PlayStation Vita. Gets a very, very good reception, mostly in Japan, pretty well received in the West, and numbers-wise continues to kind of show as, like, it didn't have the legs that Golden had, obviously, whereas, like, Golden continued to sell and be, like, one of the most highly selling games on the whole Vita's library. But definitely for a rhythm game, it had legs and a lot longer than most stuff did worldwide. Even, I would say, longer than titles like the Taiko no Tatsujin or Project Diva games. So in terms of the release, everything was kind of wrapped up and done for the most part after that. But what's so odd is that later in January, I think it was January, or it might have been late, either fall / winter 2017 or January or so 2018, Atlas announced that they were doing Persona 3 and Persona 5 Dancing, and this time I do actually mean Persona 5. So when Persona 5 and 3's Dancing Collector's Edition got announced, in Japan, they had a really, really weird announcement, and they had announced that they were including Persona 4 Dancing as a PlayStation 4 Collector's Edition pre-order bonus only. Obviously, there's no need to re-release it on Vita because it already had copies out there. What makes this PlayStation 4 port so interesting is a couple of things, and biggest of all is the fact that, as of right now, Persona 4 Dancing All Night on PS4 is the only game, at least that I'm aware of after all this time, that is exclusive to it being digital only, and there's no way to buy it a la carte. The only a la carte. So you had to buy the physical collector's edition and redeem your code that way, or you can still buy the Dancing All Night or Endless Dancing Night collector's edition digitally and get that. So obviously it's not limited in the sense of you can't buy it still, so it's not like a PT situation, and I highly doubt digital copies of this game would ever get rare. But what's so odd about this is that Atlas doubled down on this and they said, hey, this is the only way we are ever giving this game away. And after 2+ years, they continue to show that that's true. They went to the effort of making this even higher HD port of Dancing All Night for PS4, but have basically made it attached to one of the worst selling games that company has ever produced, especially in recent history. Like, when I saw how terrible the sales had been in Japan and doubly so for America of 3 and 5 Dancing, I was amazed that at no point they were like, hey, just slap it in a box and sell it for $20. Like, it seemed really, really odd. But that was the least of that game's problems. Persona 4 Dancing All Night on PS4 is kind of a weird bag, because on paper it should be the best version of the game. It has 1080p output, doesn't support PlayStation Pro, but that's Atlas, so there's nothing really new there. But what's so odd about it is in Japan, the DLC was cross-buy. So if you bought downloadable content, of which there was a ton, thankfully not as egregious as Persona 3 and 5, this DLC was actually a lot more meaningful, especially in terms of their song selection. If you bought the DLC in Japan, that DLC would work on your PS4 copy. For a reason I've still to this day never heard back, well, I've heard back, but it's not a very satisfying answer. When Atlas West released Persona 4 Dancing, they never baked it into the PSN backend of cross-buy DLC. So someone like me who bought all of the DLC for the Japanese version and the Western version on Vita of Dancing All Night, I was left in the cold for the PS4 port. Of all that DLC had to be rebought again, and this is already like such a niche thing of like, it's this exclusive game to a collector's edition that already has DLC sold again 3+ years after its release date. Like, it was just all, it seemed so asinine. That's why I emailed, I think it was Jonathan or someone at the time at Atlas West, and I was just like, hey, this has to be an error, right? Like, the DLC is saying you need to buy it, even though I already bought it all on Vita. And I got an email back from him right here. I'm looking at it, and he was like, "No, we have no plans of making it cross-buy." And just like, yeah, you have to buy it again if you want it. And I was like, why would anyone what is the point of, first of all, not just including the DLC 3 years after this game has been released in Japan and the West, let alone asking fans who've already bought it once on Vita to now double dip for the PS4 port, which for me, all these dancing games have always been preferably played on the Vita, just because even though you're playing them at half the speed and half the resolution, the form factor, especially for the way the Note Highway works, it's just much more comfortable to me to play on a smaller screen like the Vita. So that was really, really weird. And that was the thing that I'm amazed has still never really been updated or fixed. Because even, you think like, if they were any other company, and like, okay, well, a lot of people hate these games for being very DLC heavy. One of them is digital only. A lot of collectors would probably double dip on Dan on PS4 if they released it physically. So I'm amazed that they've never even just gone back and been like, okay guys, for $60, here's 3, 4, 5 Dancing with all their DLC all on one disc. There you go, play it and shut up. But no, they've definitely taken a step back from the dancing games. They never updated it nearly as much. The PS4 version never got touched again, which is kind of weird because it does actually have some flaws that the PS4 version doesn't have. The PS4 version of Dancing All Night has a lot of flaws that the Vita version never had, that you can kind of get the sense of when you're looking at the game, especially right next to each other, that the Vita version had a lot of TLC put into it, whereas the PS4 version was very clearly a bonus, and it was like designed as like, hey, this isn't something we're selling, so the standard of quality doesn't need to be as high, which is a little bit disappointing, but obviously it's a free game, so complaining is only going to get you so far. So in terms of development and release, that's about everything for Dancing All Night. Just so I can kind of give myself a little bit of a break, if you guys have any like memories or any like questions you guys want to ask me, I've not been looking at the chat just so I don't absolutely get too distracted. So if you guys have any questions or memories, I would love to hear what you guys thought of Dancing All Night, whether you played it on PS4 or PS3. So Dad, I'm very glad I'm not recording your audio. So you were telling me of how boring you thought the story was for it, and what I find so funny is I think actually one of the best parts of Dancing All Night for me personally is that story hit me in such a great place like every time I've ever played it. I love that story in a lot of the same ways of why I love the story in Persona 4, Persona 5 Scramble, because it's not a story about character development for the main cast. Like, the investigation team have been a team for over a year now. They're all very closely, like, knit. They don't really have to go through those ups and downs of regular storytelling because they've already had their introduction through various games. So what's so funny about it is, like, because those characters are basically hitting on all notes for me, I think that makes the overall storytelling so much more powerful. Like, yeah, in the grand scheme of things, do I really care about Kanamine and what was up with, like, the murders and everything? No, but at the end of the day, that really wasn't why I was playing it. I was playing it as kind of like a send-off note for those characters and everything, and I personally think that Golden works so well, and the ending of the game is even aware of that, whereas once you have finished the main story, it goes all the way back to Golden, and it has that final conversation with everyone sitting around at Junes in their golden outfits, talking about what they sort of, like, are doing right now. And it's so funny because, like, yes, it's technically the beginning of Dan's story, but it is that sort of little final epilogue moment you never got in Golden that I always wished I could see, and it just made me so happy to see it. Also, just to, like, look in the comments, I do want to point this out because Infinity and Beyond mentions it. Yeah, if you are looking for Persona 4 Dancing on PS4 and you don't have a Vita, the Endless Night Collection goes on sale all the time, physically and digitally. Whatever you do, people, don't pay, like, more than $30 for it. Like, you can get all of these games for dirt cheap, and they're really not that bad, especially when you get them on such a discount. Like, me personally, I picked up, and this was even at Japan at the time, 6 months, no, not 6 months, not even 4 months after Persona 3 and 5 Dancing released, I got both of those collector's editions for $50 with free shipping from Japan, and it came with a four disc OST, which is like, okay, well, for the CD alone, this is already, like, the best thing ever. Let's see. Neon Core said, I bought the Endless Night Collection the moment I saw it. I remember the day I got it, well, because I left my wallet at GameStop. I got from. Oh, man, I hope he actually picked up the wallet, otherwise that'd be pretty bad. Immortal Slasher says, my favorite thing about Persona 4 Dancing is the specialist meme. That's very true. Not even just it as a meme. Like, man, all of the songs and the remixes are so good, and even the ones that, like, I'm not crazy about, like, they just work, and, like, there's such a great flow. Like, one of the biggest problems with Persona 3 and 5 Dancing, in 3's case, they never used enough music from that lineage of that franchise, and in 5's case, they made the game so early, there are now songs from, like, the anime or the spin-offs that were never used, whereas, like, I look back on it even 5 years later, and Persona 4 Dancing All Night to me has, like, every song I want from that series. Now, technically, I'm cheating a little bit because they do have DLC in the form of, like, the anime openings and endings, but the fact that I can boot up my Vita right now and play Next Chance to Move On just makes me very, very happy because I am a huge simp for that series. Infinity and Beyond says, Spencer, what do you think of the Specialist meme? I think the Specialist meme is one of those rare cases of just you doing that dance, especially with this, like, with the music, like, it just, like, hits in, like, in every little weird possible way. Like, that's even why, like, it fits as, like, a perfect tutorial song. It fits as, like, a stupid meme song. It just works on so many different levels, and you can tell because they even included it in Persona 3 and 5 Dancing, because they were like, yeah, there's no song in either game soundtrack that fits as well as a song as Specialist does. The Norman says, I skipped all the text and looked up a story synopsis. Yeah, I think, though, if you are going into it from a rhythm game point, the game is very, very fully aware of it. Like, if you want to just skip it, get to the songs, get a quick platinum, it's still a fun experience, even if you skip the story. But Atlas was very aware that, like, hey, a lot of our fans aren't traditionally music game fans. They want a story. So they included a very beefy 6 to 10 hour story mode in here, and whether you liked it or not is a very subjective topic, but I think the fact that it was there and not in the other dancing titles just kind of goes to show the the amount of love that went into that first game. Like, nothing of Persona 4 dancing ever felt like a cash grab to me, at least personally. N1CK Knack says, it was a good story, the problem was how it was presented. Yeah, the visual novel representation, I think, is definitely a lot of, like, kind of contention in terms of, okay, do we really need to split up the story as if it's like Virtue's Last Reward? Like, why are we kind of splitting up with the different timelines? I could have kind of cleaned it up. There is probably a little more fluff than you really need. But I enjoyed it at least as a tool of, like, everything's voiced. I thought the voice acting was 99% great. The only 1%, I'll always have to point this out, and one day I'll get over this, I'm sure, but Laura Bailey not being able to be Rise in basically her final game hurt me to my core. It still does to this day, which really sucks. For people who don't know this, Ashley Birch was cast as Rise in Persona 4 Dancing All Night because Laura Bailey was busy filming Gears of War 4 at the time, which obviously, if you had to guess which game had a bigger budget, at least for paying your voice actors, Microsoft versus Atlas is not that much of a question. So, yeah, Laura Bailey obviously took the smarter financial decision, but I would love to ask her if she kind of wishes she could have gone it. Because no offense to Ashley Birch as a voice actor, but one of the things I've always said as a complaint for why I don't like her being Rise in this game, outside of it being Rise's final story appearance, is that this story is so pinnacle. This gets so important to her character, whether you enjoy that story or not. Having it just be recast just really hurt it, I think, on the long run, on top of the fact that the direction for Ashley Birch to just be Laura Bailey was also a testament against it, because it's like, you can tell it's not Laura Bailey, and it's not even Ashley Birch really showing herself off in the best light possible, because it's just Ashley Birch trying to be Laura Bailey, which never really works out in the long run, unless you're Matt Mercer trying to be Troy Baker. And then you get a whole career out of it. Let's see, Silent Mochi says, I bought 5 Dancing and then realized I couldn't play 4 separately, so I bought the all-night collection when it was on sale. Yeah, another thing that sucks about it, like, being part of that bundle, is if you buy one of them and then find out later. I can't tell you how many times I've had friends hit me up and be like, oh, cool, check it out, I want to play one of the Persona Dancing games. And I was like, oh, did you buy the all-night bundle? They're like, no, I just wanted to play one of them first. I'll pick them all up later. It's like, no, if you want all of them, you have to do the all-in-one bundle, because it's really, really dumb and really, really stupid. Let's see. Talkie. Silent Mochi says, I bought Marie and Adachi and are planning on getting the Miku song, and that's it, aside from the 1 or 2 costume packs. So, yeah, in terms of the DLC, what I think is so funny is... what I think is so funny about the DLC for it was they kind of nailed the songs, they nailed the weird collaborations with Miku, even the stupid stuff like Contacts or the free DLC. Everything just kind of fit a whole lot better than the reception to 3 and 5, and you could kind of tell with it, because all the songs outside of the one Rise song, which was just clearly a cut remix that was just thrown in there, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of which one it is. If you look at the DLC for Dancing All Night, there's like a 99-cent Rise song, and it's a fine remix. It's not like anything amazing, but it's just one of those things of like, that's the one case of like, okay, that was clearly just cut out of the game and sold for $1. Whereas like the other characters, like, I love the Adachi song, I love the Marie song. The Miku remix alone is just cool for her outfit. And like the Norman says, yeah, P4 anime music is just like so great, especially... if I'm not mistaken, Dad, your favorite... We were talking about this before, because we like to talk about Persona anime music a lot. Your favorite one is the second opening, where they're all putting on their glasses slowly, right? You gonna Boku or you gonna Pico? You gotta ask, what's gonna happen next? Great answer. So, let me see if you have anything else, because I'm playing the catch-up game on questions. Oh, here we go. Silent Mochi says, question is, which opening is better? Sky's the limit, next chance to move on, or keep accelerating? I'm biased. I gotta go next chance to move on. I don't know what it is about that. I think it's just because of my nostalgia boner for Persona 4 Golden, but just the animation of that one is so fun. It's so loose, and like it gets me excited in the same way of when I watch the animation opening for Dancing All Night, which actually is really interesting for... I know a lot of people give that animation style crap because it's basically the rotoscoped a whole bunch of dancers. But you can feel it that it was real people doing those moves. And I know rotoscoped animation, especially nowadays, isn't the most popular, but as a big music nerd, a big animation nerd, and a big Persona nerd, it just hit like every little box of like, yeah, stuff like this kind of looks goofy, and I probably shouldn't give it as much of a pass as I do, but I do it anyway. Ozzy asked an awesome question. What is your favorite remix in a game? So, this is a tough one because I love almost every remix in the whole one. It's probably got to be the Akira Yamaoka remix that Kanji plays, and the energy in like the visuals, the background, and just everything going on for it, like it fits as like an awesome Akira Yamaoka song. It just gets you so pumped up. Like I wish it was an optional like battle song you could pick in other titles. Like so many of the remixes are great. If I had to pick though a really, really, really close second, and I'm not just saying this to be a joke, this is actually true. I love the remix that Lotus Juice does for Backside of the TV. I think that's a really, really awesome song and a really cool remix, but I might be biased because A, I love Lotus Juice, and B, I'm a super big nerd for Yosuke. Minato gives a great shout out. Snowflakes, just in general, an awesome song. The remix for Snowflakes is amazing. The Heaven remake, Simply Bad. Yeah, you're right. The Heaven remake is great. The one thing I realized about it, though, is if you're going from, like, a really high BPM song and immediately jump into Heaven, you're going to be like, oh, God, hold on. I got to, like, slow down, like, 200 seconds. So let's see. Silent Mochi says, I think Persona 4 dancing is a little better at everything than 3 and 5. Yes, that's very, very true. And you can also tell that it was just, like, a factor of Persona 3 and 5 being developed at the same time, even though they probably had a bigger budget and even though they probably had a longer development timeline, 4 just shines in every other example. Let's see. Fluffy says, I'm pretty sure Laura Bailey has said before that she regrets not being in the game. Yeah, she had publicly said on Twitter how sad she was about not being able to do it, but I'm sure even if it wasn't a money thing, it was probably more of a contractual obligation, because I know in Gears of War, Laura Bailey also did a lot of the motion capture work, so it was a whole lot more factors into that. Let's see what other stuff we have here so I can finally catch up. Silent Mochi says, how come we never got an Igor dance? Well, easy answer is the voice actor of Igor died, so Atlus tries to use him less, unless you're Persona 5, which is a bad idea. Besides that, think about this. While you don't have an Igor dance, you at least have the nightmare fuel that is the Igor mask, which is just terrifying for everybody who plays that. Let's see. Apparently Igor is very tall, so that would be funny. Yeah, I thought Igor was very short. That was kind of weird. Key plus words. Sky's the limit gets me personally. Here we go. Mortal Shadow says, for Persona spin-off titles, do you hope that they ditch the visual novel storytelling? No, I like the visual novel storytelling, and I'm probably a little bit biased just due to the fact that Persona 3 Portable got me into visual novels as a series. You guys have 71 messages? What are you all typing below me? But yeah, I like the visual novel storytelling. I think it depends on what it's for. And I think you can tell outside of the dancing games, having them kind of go away from that sort of shows. Mortal Slasher says, let me find out you're leaving. No, would never leave my wife or dad, no matter how many songs he sings to me. Oh, here we go. Let's catch up to you guys as dropping songs. Spider says, one of the interviews mentions that the staff had trouble with Nanako's choreography. Were there any other creative bumps in the road like that? I think, honestly, and I know which interview you're talking about, more so with that kind of stems from, and you can even kind of sort of tell with the game, they were trying to decide of like, okay, we have an adult woman doing the choreography for Nanako, and we're sizing it down, so technically that kind of limits what the skeletons can really do realistically without it looking a little odd. But at the same time, there are still little bits that sort of not over sexualize, but maybe sort of show off in ways that a lot of idol culture still does for women. And I think like with the shot of like Nanako's butt dancing for like her Shadow World remix, like there's just stuff like that that's just kind of like, huh, that's a choice. I mean, I don't mind that it's there, but it's just one of those things that like, that's probably not everybody's cup of tea. Alright, so as I get back into this, let's try and catch up into more questions. Laura does a ton of mocap. That is very, very true. But yeah, so honestly though, in terms of the creative differences, the choreography stuff was the most work in terms of man hours, and I learned a lot about that when I talked to Lotus Juice, I think in 2016 at TaioCon, about how much work the choreographers just had to do for each performance. And you can really tell when you're looking into like all the stuff they do with that, it's like really, really good. Any typers in the chat? So many typers. Couldn't mocap Koromaru. I have been told, I don't know this story, I have been told there's a really, really great story about them trying to mocap Koromaru for Persona 3 dancing, but I've never gotten it. I've tried to get it on the show, but I've never gotten the full thing. But yes, Koromaru in P3 dancing, him not being there is quite the shame. They mocapped Morgana somehow. Morgana was sadly literally just like somebody in the Morgana suit dancing, so Fluffy, it's not that impressive that they mocapped it. Ozzy says, Spencer, is Nanako's butt your cup of tea? No, I will say that Nanako's minor butt is definitely not my cup of tea. But I will say Nanako does have like some of the most fun remixes and dances in the whole game, especially the Junes song. Like, by the way, big ups to Persona 4 Dan for actually giving us a chance to put the lyrics to the Junes song, which definitely didn't need to be a thing, but I super, super love it. Hey, I caught up to the bottom of the chat. Okay, so it is 5:50. I'm going to start wrapping up, but before I do that, I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming to the panel. We're going to just keep chatting until they basically kind of drag me out of here, but I just want to, because I'm using this as this week's podcast, I figured I might as well give it at least sort of an outro. So thank you guys for basically listening to me. Thank you guys for basically listening to me ranting about one of my favorite games of all time. Persona 4 Dancing is just such a special game to me because it was one of the biggest games I covered at the time in terms of for the podcast. I remember reviewing it. It was like one of the last games I really did with Atlas when they were super, super, super great. Like I had John Harden on the show multiple times talking about it, like from the development standpoint, the publishing standpoint. Like covering the game was such a blast for me. I love playing the game still to this day. Like, it's one of those rare games where I love to speedrun it in terms of platinuming. Like, if I could platinum the game more, I could. Like, for example, I have the platinum in Dancing All Night for Japanese Vita, Japanese Vita, Japanese PS4, American Vita, American PS4, and then I think I've also platinumed it 5 other times on other people's systems. It's just one of those crazy games that just like I never get sick of playing. I love the story mode. The original score, by the way, which very rarely gets as much of a shout out as it should, but like Shoji just kills it with all the like intermittent songs for the story mode, which I think a lot of people don't really talk about as much as the remixes, which obviously doesn't stand out as much. But if you haven't listened to the original soundtrack, not the remixes or the stuff you dance to, there's still tons and tons and tons of great music for Dancing All Night. So either way, if you guys enjoyed this panel or just enjoyed hearing me ranting, I mentioned at the start of the show, I do a podcast in a community called Shin Megami Tensei Network. It is a weekly podcast, and basically if you would like to find us online, you can just look at the Twitter. It is at SMT Network. My personal Twitter is Torchwood4SP. Sadly, it is not PS. Like this panel, I'm just going to passive aggressively mention till the end of time. Fluffy giving the hot takes. None of the remixes in 3 and 5 dancing are good. That is that is quite a take. Spencer, what do you think of the Tanaka remix? Infinity, are you talking about the one that was DLC in 3 and 5 dancing? The like little animated full-on remix. Yeah, that song is the only good DLC that came out of 3 and 5 Dancing. That song is amazing. It's got a crazy high speed and it's just really, really, really good. Let's see. Kazaka interview about talking about being sad recording all alone. I need Spider, I need you to like re-English that comment. I feel like there's like a good takeaway somewhere here. Fluffy has a really great talk. has a really good take that Dad would agree with, saying Lotus Shoe should do everything. Composing too. I agree. That's why he's in. That's why I like to say Lotus Shoes is the better Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin gave us Next Chance to Move On, so that's high praise. Lotus Juice should code the game. We just need like Persona 6 is just Lotus Juice, and he's making it on like Pico 8 or something, like really just basic. So yes, besides following on Twitter, if you guys want, we have a Facebook group you can find by going to facebook.com/groups/SMT Network. If you're one of those crazy kids still using Facebook, we've got like 6,000 or 7,000 people in there you can talk to every day. Besides that, I have a YouTube channel you can find by just searching Spencer Presley or Shin Megami Tensei Network on YouTube. I post all the stuff there. Hey, look, it's the Discord. Thank you, Mortal Shadow. Yes, if you'd like to join the SMTN Discord, we are very small, but I try to talk in there as much as I possibly can. So if you guys want to harass me or others in there, please, please, please feel free to join the Discord. But yeah, besides that, man, Dancing All Night is so great and definitely not cringe. I will say that might be my back of the box code. Dancing All Night, definitely not cringing all night. 100% not cringing all night.
He said, I'm the one who's got to leave. I said, nobody's really got to leave. Cause I don't need an explanation. All I need is admiration. Big restoration, bro. He goes live fish, so we gave a shot. But it didn't work, honey, cause we had a whole lot going on and more. I took love over shadow bad dreams. Baby, don't worry, cause you ain't alone. Only time running days without nights. Tears pass through. Every time, look at the picture in the frame. Gazing fascination, so hard. You still think that it's nothing but love. Rain, stay I'm the one who's got to leave. I said nobody's really got to leave. Cause I don't give an explanation. All I need is admiration. Big frustration. He goes live feet, so we gave a shot. But it didn't work, and it goes baby, I remember you had dreams that were not intended by sorrow. Cloudy sky overshadowed by rain. Baby, don't cry. Our love song repeats by sundry speed. You have created it again. Countless tears falling down, you will see signs of
But yeah, thanks for the panel. And now I'm gonna open myself up for criticism because I'm gonna be extremely honest with you guys. For the first 40 minutes, I did not look at chat. It was way too distracting. I'm just looking at chat and trying to like remember all my notes about the history and everything I had pulled up. So please let me know, what did you guys think of the panel? Did anyone learn a single thing? Thank you, Neo Core, who I keep wanting to say your name is Neon Corn, which I know is not true. Thank you, Minato. Thank you, Norman. Thank you, Immortal. Thank you, Low Haze. Learn some knowledge. You got your. If we were being really cringe, I would do like the little soundboard with with like your point up knowledge. I saw like Fangamer has the Fangamer has the like little Persona 5 point up things, and I literally thought to myself, like, I've never felt more like a bully in my life. I was like, if I like had someone go up to me, like if I saw someone wearing it, I wouldn't make fun of them. But if I like had somebody like send these to me and say, "Hey, what do you think of these Persona 5 point up earrings?" I would just go, "No." Like that, you're just wearing cringe. It's just like it's not. It doesn't look cool. No one's gonna look at you and go, "Oh, dude, this is the point up thing for Persona 5. That's so cool." Oh my gosh. So how did everyone like their PersonaCon, by the way? Can we drop an M in the chat, please? Can we just summon mod just by typing M in as many times as possible? Several people are typing.